Here's the first Navamsa chart that we're going to look at. To start with, let's just look at the deities. We've got the Sun, Moon, Venus, Saturn, and the Lagna all in Nri, or the human Navamsas. So that's, 5 factors and 4 planets, over half the planets. Then just Mars and Mercury, and then the nodes are in Deva. And Jupiter is the only planet in a Rakshasa Navamsa. So we see that the Nri, or the human Navamsa, really dominates this chart. The Moon is there. Venus, the important planet in the Navamsa, is in the Nri, and the Lagna is Nri. Sun is Nri. Most of the important planets are there. So this shows a person who's going to be a hardworking, pragmatic person who wants to build, get ahead in life, be productive in life, and enjoy the fruits of their productivity, basically, and build something. And that's very, very true of this person. Interesting enough, the odd man out on this chart is Jupiter, which represents the husband. And this person has had a history of men that had a dominance of Rakshasa Navamsas in their chart. So, which had a very different path than she would prefer to have. Okay, unfortunately, because that can cause some problems. So this is a Nri person, and it's very evident in this person's lifestyle. Okay, so they're a builder, producer. They like working. They like being productive. They like, gaining the fruits of their labors. Okay? Now, starting looking at the planets, the most important planet is Venus, and we see some problems with Venus right away. First, it's in a natural enemy's Navamsa. It's in Leo, so it's sleeping in the Navamsa. Not a good thing. Venus is joined with enemy Moon, enemy Sun, so it's getting starved by the Sun and Moon. So, and then it's also starved by Venus in the Navamsa, okay, or by being in Leo. So this is a very starved Venus. It gets a little, or neutral influence from Jupiter, and a little bit of help from its friend Saturn to 4 points. Now, Saturn's a real strong chart in the Navamsa. He's the best planet in the Navamsa, really, because he's in his own sign, Aquarius. But he's just not aspecting the Venus enough to really help him. Okay? Now, fortunately, the Sun, who rules Venus's sign, is sleeping. The Sun, which conjuncts the Venus in the Rashi chart, is sleeping in the Navamsa. So the Sun's not able to starve, or Venus, and it's not able to agitate Venus very significantly, okay? And it really doesn't agitate it at all because it's sleeping in the Navamsa. So that takes off some of that grief. However, we still got the Moon being conjunct Venus, so the Moon is still starving Venus. So Venus is feeling starved because its requirements for feeling, emotionally it's feeling starved, obviously, because it's the Moon, okay? And that was very true in this person's life, okay? Venus has caused them to have 2 marriages that were very unfulfilling, okay? So we see that Venus is not real good. If you have a Venus that's in bad shape, you end up falling in love with people that aren't going to support the way you want your life to be and the way you are naturally. So it's no fun ever to have a bad Venus in the Navamsa. Okay. Waiting for that noise to go by there. All right, there we go. Okay, we're having forest fires, so the helicopters are out right now, and so I just closed all my windows so that wouldn't make too much noise. All right, so Venus is just mediocre. Not a great planet. It's worse than mediocre. It's largely a starved planet, which is a little bit of help from Saturn. So marriage life is not going to be really happy for this person. And they won't choose their path, we would say, wisely, meaning they won't choose their path based on what it is that's really going to make them feel the most fulfilled. They'll always choose something that ends up being less fulfilling than they had hoped or expected. Okay? House-wise, the most important house is the ninth, and we see that the ninth lord is Venus, so it suffers from that same problem. The ninth bhava, however, gets a little bit of help on it with being aspected by Jupiter from a great enemy sign, so that hurts it. Then it gets helped by Saturn to 22 points from its own sign. So Jupiter is really trashing the ninth bhava because Saturn's helping it, but not as much as Jupiter's trashing it. Then in the Rashi chart, Mars is conjunct the ninth bhava cusp. So Mars is influencing the ninth bhava. Mars is in Aries in the Navamsa, so it's a good strong Mars. And it's very strong because it's in the beginning of Aries in the Navamsa, so it has a lot more weight to it. So we've got a really great Mars helping the Navamsa. Jupiter's hurting the Navamsa, ninth house. Saturn's helping it, and Mars is really helping it. Mars is helping it the most. Now, getting to Mars, when it helps, when it's good in the Navamsa, just makes a person be able to deal with things in a way that things aren't as big of a deal. They're just not prone to fighting about things that aren't worth fighting. They don't express their irritations or unhappiness aggressively or anything, or destructively. They're just more logical and level-headed about everything. Mars always gives that good sense of logic. And also Mars is that planet of dealing with our teammates and associates, that important planet that has to do with the Karaka planet, the main Karaka planet for the third house. And remember, the third house is the second most important planet in the Navamsa because it helps us get along with people. So good Mars in the Navamsa helps us get along with the people that we're trying to be married to. A bad Mars creates a lot more fighting and quarreling and frustration. So this person has a really good Mars, and it's conjunct the ninth bhava cusp in the Rashi. So that Mars has gone a long ways. Is one of the main reasons this person was able to manage even being married with these other afflictions. Okay, Mars is independent. A strong Mars influence in ninth makes it easier for the person to be independent, where they don't have to get everything from their relationship. They get what they can from it. And the rest of it, they're happy to have their independence. Okay? And that was also the quality of this person. In their marriages, they had a lot of time to do things on their own, with their husbands being away at work a lot. So they were able to enjoy a lot of things about their life. So Mars, when he's strong in Navamsa, really can reduce neediness, okay, and make a person just more independent. Mars is the brahmachari. He's the one planet that doesn't have a spouse. So in the Navamsa, Mars is sort of that kind of part of us that's able to take care of ourselves without the need of our partner or our marriage. And Venus, of course, is the planet of being taken care of with our partnership in marriage. And both of those are important parts of it to make a marriage work. If a person can't do anything for themselves, they're just no good in a marriage, right? It's like having someone on your football team who's useless. They just get in the way. So good Mars goes a long ways in helping marriage work, and especially when it's influencing a house like this. So it's conjunct that ninth bhava cusp. So Mars has gone a long ways in helping things, okay? Now the third bhava, over here, where's the third bhava? The third bhava happens to fall in Scorpio, whose lord is Mars, okay? And Mars, as far as influences, we see he's in his Mula Trikona, so he's in Garvita, or proud, Avashta. Mars is influenced by Jupiter, who's his friend, but a sleeping friend, so he can't help him. And by Saturn, his neutral. And that's all there is to Mars. So there's no negative influence, as this is a good, solid, proud Mars. So Mars is what's kept this person, made this person capable of having any happiness in marriage life at all. Just their independent nature, the ability to take care of themselves, and their ability to be logical and not to take things personally if they're not meant to be taken personally. And that makes it a lot easier for a woman. This is a woman's chart who's got this sleeping Jupiter, okay, in the Navamsa. Jupiter gets some help, and Jupiter is again always important in a woman's chart because it has to do with the husband. So the husband's not great because it's sleeping. Fortunately, Jupiter gets some help from its friend Moon and a lot of help from its friend Mars. But then it gets hurt by Mercury and Mercury and Venus quite a bit. So there's plenty of starvation on Jupiter, but Mars again saves the day to some degree with the Moon. So Mars is the saving planet here and just shows that independent quality to deal with things logically, to deal with her husband logically, that makes her get the best out of them instead of being needy and lost and confused, which a bad Mars would have indicated. And that would have created a lot more problems in relationships. Okay? But there's a lot of problems in this chart too. We've got a bad Venus and a bad ninth house. So the choices they make for marriage are not going to be good. But their ability to struggle and live with those choices is very high. First, because Mars is strong, and because Saturn, the planet of living with things that aren't great, is very strong in the Navamsa. So this is a person of making bad choices, but being able to live with them. Okay? But Venus is the most important planet that represents the fulfillment we ultimately get. And that is going to be less because Venus is starved. And being independent in a relationship just means you've got that ability, but that doesn't make you fulfilled with your partner or your marriage, of course. So definitely a lack of fulfillment with that Venus there. Now, this person in Jupiter Dasha is when they start having lots of problems in marriage. No surprise, right? Jupiter's in a great enemy sign. Jupiter's aspect in the ninth house of marriage to 57 points. And Jupiter is starved by being in a natural enemy sign. So it's a problematical Jupiter. So marriage life really deteriorates once Jupiter Dasha kicks in. Okay, they got married under Rahu Dasha. And I guess we can talk about that. Rahu Dasha can always give marriage. In this chart, Rahu's lord is the moon. And the moon is pretty decent. You know, he's in a friend sign. He doesn't have an influence of any enemies. So he's okay. And he's in a good house. He's in the fourth sign from the ascendant in an angle. And he rules the fourth house cusp in the Navamsa. Remember what I said, the fourth and 10th cusps in the Navamsa are inclined to give marriage, but usually they make a person a housewife or something. In a woman's chart, they're very strong for giving marriage. So this is a classic example of that. Rahu is in the fourth, its lord is decent enough to have a marriage. Marriage really starts to deteriorate once Jupiter hits because Jupiter's hurting the Navamsa, ninth house, to, 57 points. And so at that point, they start realizing that this path is not really what's giving them the fulfillment and purpose they had hoped it would have given, unfortunately. Okay? And that happened at a point in life when the husband, Jupiter, started having frustrations at work that he brought home. So, whereas in Rahu period the husband was more enjoyable to spend time with, after Jupiter Dasha started, the husband became so self-absorbed and unhappy that there just wasn't a lot of room to have happiness, for this woman to have happiness with her husband, at which point he just wasn't any fun to be around. Again, we see Jupiter is sleeping. It's the husband who starts giving less to the marriage. Okay? Then in Jupiter-Venus, the marriage ends and there's divorce. Why Jupiter-Venus? Well, first of all, Jupiter-Venus is a great period for getting rid of people in your lives. You almost always get rid of somebody, whether it's somebody who dies or a possible marriage. A lot of people think Jupiter-Venus, two benefics, it's going to be great. It's not usually the case. In this case, both are sleeping. Venus, we've seen, is very starved. Venus is in the 12th sign from Jupiter. Okay? From Jupiter, Venus rules the 9th Rashi. Venus rules the 9th Bhava cusp. It's just really destroying marriage. Okay? And so in Jupiter-Venus, marriage came to an end. Again, when the Antardasha Lord's in the 12th from the Dasha Lord, there's a greater chance of losses. If bad things are indicated, the planets are bad. And if good things are indicated, everything ends up costing more and taking more energy than expected to produce that good. It's never ideal to have that Dasha Lord in the 12th, Antardasha Lord in the 12th. And in the Rashi chart, from the Dasha Lord, Jupiter, Venus is in the 8th too. So they're in 6-8 in the Rashi chart too, which indicates a period of change. So Jupiter, Venus, marriage comes to a close, okay, for this person. Okay, now we're going to flash forward into the future. Saturn, we've seen, is a better planet. Saturn helps the 9th house to 22 points, the 3rd house to 35 points. Okay, it's a good planet. It's strong in its own sign. It rules the 10th Bhava cusp in the Navamsa. It's in the 10th sign from the ascendant in the Navamsa. Its enemy sun is sleeping, so can't hurt him. The moon is hurting him a bit. Mars is hurting him a lot. But then Venus, well, it's not helping him. But Saturn has some strength to be in, because he's in its own sign. He's better than Jupiter, right? So in Saturn Dasha, in the beginning of Saturn, because it's really the strongest planet to give marriage, has a strong influence to the 9th house. It rules the 10th house cusp in the Navamsa. And Saturn, they meet a person that they marry, that they end up marrying, okay? And that marriage is a lot more enjoyable than the marriage that they had in their through their Jupiter Dasha. Is it perfect? It can't be, right? Because Saturn does have the strong influence of the moon, and not so strong of moon, but a strong influence of Mars. So there is that Mars sort of rebelling against it, that Saturn, and starving Saturn a little bit. So the relationship doesn't provide a lot of things Saturn looks for, like security, physical, material security and safety. It doesn't really give that. In the current marriage, most of the material security comes from her paycheck, not her husband's paycheck. She brought like $100,000 into the marriage. He brought, no money into the marriage. She has had a steady, good paying $60,000, $70,000 job, forever, for a long time. He's had a job for 6 months, and then he quits for 6 months, and he finds another job, and then he gets on disability because he gets laid off. And he's always looking for reasons to work as little as possible. So, the security is all coming from her. Again, Mars is the independent person. And so the part of Saturn that wants to be taken care of in the marriage is not really happening. Being taken care of materially is not really happening because of the fact that Saturn is starved by Mars. And this person is, doing more of it. Okay? But still, it's better than Jupiter because Saturn at least is in good dignity, right? Okay, whereas Jupiter was in bad dignity. Now, currently they're running Saturn-Jupiter, and their husband has had some pretty serious health problems so far already, and there's still another 7 months to go in Saturn-Jupiter, and right now they're actually in the middle of taking some tests about his health. So we can see that problematical Jupiter. It's in the 8th sign from Saturn. Never good to have the Antardasha Lord in 6th, 8th, or 12th from the Dasha Lord. Jupiter's a troubled planet here. And if we break it down a little bit more, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus is always a time to worry about. Okay. Saturn, Jupiter, Venus is when they last actually talked to me because of a more serious health problem that came up for this person. The fact that they crossed and lived through, that he made it through Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, is great because that's really the worst possible period in Saturn, Jupiter. Venus is a natural enemy of Jupiter. Venus is in the 12th from Jupiter. I've already seen Jupiter, Venus, the Mahadasha and Antardasha end of marriage. So we'd want to be concerned about this other Antardasha. Okay? Then Now they're in Saturn, Jupiter, Moon. Okay, that's going to be much better, okay, to help hold things together. Jupiter, Mars will help the person, their husband. From Jupiter, Mars is in the 8th. Okay, Mars is good in the 8th. It's the 8th Lord from Jupiter. It's a friend of Jupiter and helping the husband. So in Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, they'll get on top of the problem and deal with it successfully. Because Mars is involved, it'll probably require some operation, however, okay, that he'll have to go through. So we're reading some of the trouble that is going to happen to the spouse. Now, why are we using the Navamsa for that? Because we're looking at Jupiter, and Jupiter is the spouse in every chart. So this is the spouse and her, the things they have to go through in their marriage, and that's some ill health on his part, corrected by surgery, okay? But if they weren't running Jupiter, I would not be talking about their health so much, because, you know, it's Jupiter that represents the husbands as a person, individual, and their body so much. Okay, just wanted to make that clear. If they were running Venus, Saturn, Venus, I wouldn't be talking about the husband's health. Okay, because Venus is not the husband. But here, Jupiter is specifically the husband. So that's why we're talking about his health. All right. Now, while that threatens the marriage, should we be too concerned about it? Well, not really, because in the Rashi chart, Jupiter's strong in its own sign, right? So physically, the husband will do better. Will survive. We know that just because Jupiter's strong in Mula Trikona in the Rashi chart. So that's the chart of body, so that the husband has a healthy enough body to get through. But we can see it's going to create a lot of stress and turmoil to the marriage. Part of that could be because of how the husband takes care of himself. That may become frustrating to the wife, because Jupiter's in the sign of Virgo, right? And Virgo is all about self-improvement and taking care of oneself by trying things and finding out what works best. Jupiter's sleeping there. And so there could be frustration with just how the husband takes care of herself. And that's an issue that's come up in this Antardasha, where she just sits in front of me and shakes her head and says, you know, the things he just won't do this. He goes, you can tell him, you know, this will help, and he just won't do it. You know, he gets into his habits and he just won't do anything outside of it. So that's caused an element of frustration, as you can imagine, when you want to help a loved one and they're just stuck in their own way. All right, so some problems, but Jupiter's health will survive just because of this. And Mars is going to help Jupiter survive, the marriage survive, because we got that great Mars helping out Jupiter, his friend. Okay. After that, they're going to go into Mercury Dasha. Now, Mercury doesn't rule any important bhavas. Okay. It does rule the Jupiter, the husband, though. And Mercury's in a natural friend sign, but his friend Venus is sleeping in Leo, so he can't really help him. He's hurt a little bit by the moon, not doing anything by Jupiter, and not helped by Venus either. Okay, because Venus is sleeping. So his only friend that's influencing him is sleeping. Otherwise, he's not influenced by anything except enemy moon. A little bit. So there's a little bit of starvation on Mercury. It's not a great Mercury. Okay? So we can be sure that Mercury Dasha will bring some problems. It's not a great Mercury. It has a little starvation with nothing good on it. It's in a natural friend sign, but since its friend Venus is sleeping, he doesn't get any help from that, really. Then he's got a little bit of starvation from the moon. Then he's in the 6th sign from the ascendant, which is a planet that has to do with struggle. So as Mercury Dasha progresses, we're going to see some difficulties. And overall, probably Saturn Dasha is going to be their overall best period for marriage, which is coming to a close in about 8 months, or let's say 7 months now. Okay? So we talked a lot about marriage on this person's chart. And a lot of it is because they had a strong marriage destiny. We can see some of that by Rahu being on an angle, and its Lord Moon being one of the decent planets. I mean, Rahu being in the sign of the 4th house cusp, activating the 4th cusp Lord. Saturn ruling the 10th cusp and being in strength. So the lords of the 4th and 10th cusp are relatively strong. Okay. The 7th lord, which is the partner, is strong. Okay. Those are all indications that their path is going to have a more marital nature. Because again, the Navamsa is the path that we believe in and want to follow. So they want to follow it because they have those indications. But Venus is in bad shape, so they choose the wrong marriage, or a marriage that's less than ideal. But then they persevere through it because of Saturn, and they have the independence and the strength of character to find happiness there anyway. And that's a really important thing. In Brihat Parashara, they talk about all the different things that the planets represent. Like Sun is Atma, Moon is Manas, Mars is Sattvam. And what's Sattvam? Sattvam is strength of character. Okay? Unfortunately, a lot of translators translate Sattvam as strength. Well, it's not. It has to do with Sattva. Sattvam is strength of character. So good Mars gives that disciplined, honorable, knight in shining armor kind of quality. Okay? And this person has that nobility. So Mars can give that, nobility. And that independent nobility that can sacrifice a lot for other people without having a need to be repaid for that. Because that's really what nobility is. It's not living in a castle and eating good food while all the peasants starve, right? Nobility is being able to live for other people in a way to make their lives better without being too concerned about your own, the cost or the suffering it may bring upon you. So with the good Mars and that Navamsa, this person very much has that noble quality, which is really a rare quality, unfortunately. Okay, so that helps them, those two planets, especially Mars, helps them have some happiness in marriage. But overall, they definitely choose the wrong men, and their friends and, family members always wonder about the next man that they choose because Venus is choosing the wrong partner, and then Jupiter is sleeping too. So we have this problem, okay? We would always want to verify the marital path, based on Gemini. Okay, this video has actually have plenty of time left, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Gemini uses the Upapada, which is the pot of the 10th house, to see if a person's going to get married or not. The 10th cusp in the Rashi is Cancer, which puts the Pada in Aries. Aries is Rashi aspected by just one planet, Mercury, a benefic. So that's indicating a marital path. Then we need to look at Aries in the Saptamsha as well. In the Saptamsha, Aries has a benefic Jupiter, a benefic Venus influencing it. Two benefics. Then it has malefic Saturn conjuncting Aries, and whenever Rahu or Saturn conjunct the Upapada, it indicates a marriage coming to an end at some point, a divorce or something like that, usually a divorce. And then it has the moon, which is cruel because it's waning, influencing too. So there's some indications of divorce for sure, but there's plenty of indications for indicating a marriage path in this person's life. Okay, so it's always good to check that Upapada according to the Gemini rules, and I get into that very involved in the Gemini 3 class where we talk about that. So I just wanted to cover it briefly here because you don't want to predict just by looking at the Navamsa that a person's going to get married, because they may choose another path. You know what I mean? You need to check Gemini to see if their highest path is marriage path or if their highest path is an ashram type path. And then you can proceed to judge the Navamsa. If this person had a path of non-marriage, of renunciation, then they would have chosen a spiritual path that wasn't true. Like they might have become I'm making a joke here, a Jehovah's Witness or something, But basically they would have chose a spiritual path that was limiting and really the growth and sense of purpose it could have given, because the ninth house in the Navamsa and Venus in the Navamsa are not in good shape. Okay? And in that case, this person would have dealt with it quite well, because they have that strength of character to give happiness to themselves and struggle onward in life and find meaning in that. And that's what Mars does. Mars lives for the fight and the honor rather than the fulfillment and the happiness. And this person has that quality very much. Okay? And then, like I said, they're very strongly a Nri person, wanting to build and be productive and enjoy the fruits of their labor, and feel like they're doing something, productive in the world. Even if they're not a builder or something that's going to last, they want to feel that their labor is productive. That's another human quality. Not wasting one's labor on things that are useless. You'll find people who squander time in things that are fruitless and non-productive and non-helpful to the world will more often be devas or rakshasas who've got afflicted planets in those Navamsas. But Nris always want to be productive. It's an important thing for them to have. Okay? So this person has been, Jupiter Dasha was hard for them to be productive. They were in a marriage. There's limited things they could do. And we see that Jupiter's not in great shape. Saturn Dasha, and also Jupiter was in a Rakshasa Navamsa. Okay, so obviously there was a lot of room to be productive in Jupiter Dasha. In Saturn Dasha, they've been extremely productive, though. Saturn Dasha is when they really started a meaningful work where they felt like they were giving to the world and getting a great paycheck in return. And that didn't even start until Saturn Dasha. It didn't even happen until Saturn Dasha. Good Saturn, good dignity, and in the Nri Navamsa. So that's when that productivity really went. So in lots of ways, this is the happiest they've been, because they have such a strong human nature and Saturn Dasha that they feel like they're on that path, which they've always wanted to be. They don't want to retire. They're quite older. They're in their 60s. They don't want to retire. They started working late, and they just want to keep on working another 10 years. Okay. Enough said on this chart, I believe. So I hope everyone got a lot out of that. And we'll have a few more Navamsa examples. Oh, no, wait. There's something else I wanted to do. I knew there was something. Okay, going back to this. Let's look up at some of these things. The Lagnas, Navamsa, and all that. The Navamsa Lagna is Taurus. The native with Taurus Navamsa will be wise, will enjoy pleasures, and will have a big stomach. He will be strong, long-faced, will walk awkwardly, will have moving eyeballs, and will possess many daughters. Difficulty and diseases can be expected in the 22nd, 10th, 23rd, or 72nd year of age. Well, not a lot of this real accurate. They've got an equal amount of daughters as sons. They have 2 of each. These years were not particularly disastrous for them, okay, health-wise. They haven't hit this year 72nd yet, but these other years were not particularly negative. Like I said, these cookbook recipes on the Navamsa, I haven't found them to really work that good. I don't care what zodiac you use, what Ayanamsha you use. I've never found them to give consistently good results. But they're kind of there just for, just so you understand the background of people trying to use the Navamsa 1,500 years ago, I guess. Okay? The moon's Navamsa, Yavana Jataka and other texts give a lot of importance to. This person's moon is in the 2nd Navamsa of Cancer. Okay? Cancer is the 1st Navamsa, and then Leo's the 2nd Navamsa. And we can tell that because the moon falls between 320 Cancer and 640 Cancer. So the moon's in the 2nd Navamsa of Cancer. So we'll go to Cancer here. In the 2nd is born a red-skinned man, the region of whose heart is lumpy, whose mouth, face, and eyes are like those of a cat, and whose knees and legs are thin. He is a generous person who is fierce in strife and whose deeds are terrible in battle. Not necessarily true about this person. However, the Navamsa Lord Sun is sleeping in Navamsa, remember? Okay, now what this is supposed to really mean is that when the moon's in the Navamsa of the sun, the person has a sun quality to their nature. Now this person's going to have that anyway because the sun is conjunct the moon. And they have that, and it's also conjunct their Lagna Lord Venus. So this person is a very square-built woman. You know, her arms and legs are thicker, square. Her shoulders are more broad. Her hips are more broad. She's very more square-built person. Okay? Moon is influencing Lagna Lord Venus, so they still have a lunar feminine quality. There's no doubt she's an attractive woman with, you know, soft, feminine, nice moon features, but their bodily build is more squarish due to that sun. So we see all these other things influencing the moon, so we can't just try to make these predictions based on just the moon's Navamsa. We have to look at the planets conjunct the moon and the planets aspecting the moon. Now the strongest aspect to the moon is Jupiter, 52 points. So we've got Venus, Sun, and Jupiter all influencing the moon, all having a part in this person's nature, innate nature. Those are the strongest planets there, and they're all true. They're very Venetian. In quality, things are good to them, or important to them. They have a good taste of judgment of quality, like Venus has. They enjoy, you know, nice clothes and so on, and quality things. Jupiter there makes them optimistic, charitable and giving person, very unselfish, nice strong aspect to the moon. The sun there makes them, like I said, more blockily built, but also very steadfast in any direction they choose. They can keep going down a road a very long time. They're very steadfast and consistent in everything they do. They're not flaky at all, which is a quality of the sun. So all those influences are on the moon. So we can't just say, oh, the moon's in the Navamsa, second Navamsa of Cancer, and this is what the person's going to be like. We just have to look at that Navamsa Lord and get some ideas from it. Now, aspects to the moon. If the moon is in the Navamsa, if the moon is in the Navamsa of the sun, right here, if it's aspected by Jupiter, which is the strongest planet to it, it makes a rich, fat man. Okay? Not necessarily true. They're not fat, and they're not unusually wealthy. They're doing really well. They're doing fine, but you wouldn't call them rich. They're like totally solid, debt-free middle class. Okay? But they have other Jupiter qualities, like I mentioned. They're very charitable. They're very giving. They're very optimistic. Never remember this person really have any negative thoughts. They're very optimistic. They have a good, strong Jupiter to the moon, or Jupiter's influencing the moon. And sure, while Jupiter is sleeping in the Navamsa, it's actually strong in other Vargas, so it's going to have some good stuff to it. So if we use these sutras too literally, we're going to make mistakes. Rich, fat man. Well, they're not rich and they're not fat. They're, fat in spirit, fat in optimism, but they're not fleshly fat. So it's better just to remember the principles, to see the person's innate nature, the way they are naturally, look at the planets influencing the moon by aspect and conjunction, and the moon's Navamsa, and then we'll have the picture, okay? And that'll give a much better interpretation than just reading those sutras blindly, okay? And it's because of sutras like those, that the textbooks are largely littered with those types of sutras, that a lot of Western astrologers who approach Vedic astrology think it's a joke. They don't have a lot of respect for it. They don't know what you can do with Shadbala, They don't know what you can do with dignities. They don't even use dignities hardly in Western astrology. They don't know what you can do with all the Varga charts. They just read these crazy interpretations that just don't pan out well, and then they think Vedic astrology is just something some people brag about, but that it really isn't effective. Of course, we know otherwise, but it's important to try to understand what the author's talking about, what he's telling us to do technically, and then apply that technique. And then it always works really, really good. Okay? Planets in other Navamsas. Okay. Mars in own Navamsa produces a fierce, mighty, prominent hero who slays his enemies. Okay, well they are. They're the hero in their relationships for sure. You know, when there's a tragedy, they're the one that jump in to take care of things and fixes things. Like if there's somewhere where somebody falls over and needs CPR, they're going to be the one who just walks right in there and starts taking control of the situation and saves that person's life. Okay, they've definitely got that Mars. So this is just basically saying Mars in Mars' sign is a double Mars, a very great knight in shining armor, basically. Okay. Venus in the Navamsa of the Sun, a terrifying Nayaka. Okay. So we don't like Venus in the Navamsa of the Sun. Okay, that creates a lot of interior frustration, basically, because Venus has a really hard time feeling love when it's in the Sun. Okay, when it's in the Sun's Navamsa or when it's agitated by the Sun. Mercury was in the Navamsa of Venus, one who engages in laughter and singing. So someone enjoys a good time. Mercury-Venus type conjunction. So it basically just says an influence of the, Venus Navamsa is going to have a Venetian quality to Mercury. Real simple. Sun was in the Navamsa of Saturn, one who has a retinue of low people. Okay, so one who hangs around with low people, Saturn type people, someone who even if they're well bred, still decides to hang out with servile Saturnian type people. Okay. Another way of looking at though, Sun in the Navamsa of Saturn, is someone who doesn't discriminate against other people. Someone who doesn't see it worse being with a poor person than a wealthy person. And that would be more true of this person, especially with Saturn being strong in the Navamsa. Jupiter in the Navamsa of Mercury, one who knows the rules of poetry and fine arts. Well, we could say this person has a instinctive, has good taste in those things. Okay? But again, we know that Jupiter is sleeping in Mercury's sign. Okay? Which is not good. So Jupiter in Mercury's sign is sleeping, knows the rules of poetry and fine arts. That's almost making it too prearranged, Poetry and fine arts are something that there really shouldn't be too many stringent rules attached. It should be seen for what it is. When we drop Jupiter in Mercury sign, the openness of Jupiter to hear and be open to artistic expression gets diminished. It's sleeping. And now everything comes down to rules and fine arts, or rules. And that, of course, reduces the arts. So we want to read this in the context of what's happening. We know Jupiter in the Navamsa of Mercury, or in the sign of Mercury anywhere, sleeping, and that Jupiter gets diminished. Jupiter is very open and sees the good in what's in front of him. A sleeping Jupiter is not open. It doesn't see the good in what's in front of him. Okay? Saturn in its own Navamsa produces a man of bad character who is rich in wives and sons. So Saturn strongly want to make a bad character person. Again, this comes from a period in India, which is still existing, unfortunately, where there's a lot of stigma attached to not just living meekly in the context of your society and culture. If a person has a big dose that they have a great capacity for detachment, that they're going to do what they feel they really need to do regardless of the consequences, that would be considered a man of bad character. In Rahu Dasha, when they got married, and Rahu, of course, gives the results of Saturn, they eloped. So that would make a person a man of bad character in a social context where the father was meant to, this was in Europe at a time when, the father was expected to approve of the marriage before the marriage happened. The father did not approve of the marriage, did not like her husband, and she decided she was going to get married anyway. So we see the strong level of detachment of being willing to carry all one's burdens and all one's risks on their own. And that's sort of a great quality in the way that a person's willing to step out into the unknown because they think they should, and they're going to carry the burden of that no matter what anyone says. And that's what this person was like. But that can be judged as bad character because they didn't listen to their elders. Okay, but basically this is saying Saturn on Saturn, strong Saturn, makes a person do what they think they have to, and they'll carry their own burdens, and they'll be detached, and they won't care about some of the repercussions. They'll just decide if there is, they'll bear them, and they expect everyone else to do the same too. To everyone else to have that level of detachment. Unfortunately, lots of people won't have that level of detachment, and they'll take things personally and think, oh, she loves this guy way more than she loves her family. She doesn't care about the family, and play those kind of games. But that's not how this person thinks of it. They just think they're just more detached about people and things in general. So when we look at those interpretations, one of my favorite, I think the best ones given are the planets in their own, in the different Navamsas. Okay? But while you read those, keep in mind the the sleeping awake stuff. Like right away we know that's Jupiter sleeping in the Navamsa, and Jupiter's the husband, which means in Jupiter Dasha, her husbands are going to be closed-minded. Very, very true. Okay? Her husbands were very closed-minded to other possibilities, to the point that there was nothing they could enjoy because they had such a narrow, closed focus, unfortunately. Okay? All right, enough on this chart. We'll have another chart in the next video. Thank you.